Hello there, CodeMaker4 here. I'm just going to show some random projects I made that have to do with vertex objects. So this is a vertex object. It's an object made out of vertices. That's about as simple as it gets. And as you can see by clicking with the mouse and holding down and dragging, you can actually kind of change this object's shape, and it dynamically creates and deletes vertices in the space. Depending on the vertex length. That's just to make sure that there's going to be some consistent spacing between these points and to make sure that there's enough detail. So after creating this, I wanted to plan to play around with some more vertex stuff. So I created this random planet generator. And don't mind the blue square at my mouse, it's just me testing around with transformation stuff. It's supposed to follow my mouse, which it does very well, so that's a good sign. So this is just your standard infinitely generated planet, and there's large hills and stuff, and it's actually quite large. It's so large that I have to do some level of detail, fancy stuff. It's 500,000 vertices. Wait, it isn't infinite? No, it can't be infinite, because guess what? If we zoom out far enough, you'll notice that it's actually a circle. And there's 500,000 vertices spread over this circle. You can zoom in roughly anywhere and you'll see that there's more and more and more details that come up. At this point, you can barely see a single vertex. It should be around 20 pixels large at this point. Yeah, and the performance in this is awesome. That's like the entire point. So when you zoomed in, all the vertices are drawn, like none of them are skipped, no shenanigans, except for those that are off screen. If I zoom out on the page, you actually can kind of see what's going on outside of the screen. So we're just adding in some random vertices to the side to kind of make sure that this shape will be finished. That's also why it kind of gets glitched out. So when you go down too far, it just kind of doesn't work anymore. But at this point, like all the like normal zoom equivalent of this is like going down far into the ground. Only then it stops working properly. Yeah, that's kind of it for this planet thing. I was planning on like also adding in the movement, like editing stuff. Wasn't really bothered to do that yet. I was mostly focusing on doing the level of detail rendering. So all of this is a very, 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 very large linked list of vertices. It isn't all put into an array. And each planet has an array of vertices that each have their own linked list of vertices linked to them. So let's say, wait, let me grab a drawing board. File, just new. So let's say you have your like awesome planet and it's like very nicely shaped, and you have to like this rock sticking out. So of course it's gonna consist out of lots of vertices, right? So I am just like pretend that these are the only vertices and that there's not like more detail than I actually drew. So essentially the idea is that each one of them has a kind of root vertex. So maybe this one is a root vertex, and that one is a root vertex. And only is one vertex per like loop is actually being stored in the array of a planet. And essentially what happens is that when the draw function on this vertex is being called, it's gonna start checking for other vertices next to it and kind of include all of them into a large chain and draw that. Of course, and that's also like not drawing stuff that's outside of the screen and level of detail stuff that gets on top of that. And if you have a detached object, that's of course going to be its own separate loop. So that's why if I go to the planet class, there's going to be an array of chain starts. Let's see what some more code that I need to show. That. Oh, and then there's circular Purlin noise. That's also a problem I had to solve. So this looks like your average Purlin noise function with like layers and how they scale and weight. Then there's also an initial scale factor, not in just units, but in radians. because of course we're dealing with circles. And really, this is just your normal Purlin noise implementation, except that there are some edge cases for when we're dealing with the beginning on the end of the circle. Of course, the circle doesn't have a beginning or a end, but our arrays that we're dealing with do, so we need to kind of make sure that it loops around properly. And I'm using a homemade vector class. It just has lots of functions. Yeah. So all of this is on GitHub. So if we go to CodeMake for github.io/vertex planet test, you can take a look. You can just control zoom to get into this glitched out view. And for JavaScript surface, I'm just gonna like undo the zoom. CodeMake for github.io/vertex surface test. So the vertex planet test and the vertex surface test. As the name implies, these are just tests. I'm not really planning on doing anything with them. I might at some point merge the moving around with the large planet. That. I'm CodeMaker 4. Bye. This is awful.